Jupiter, the moon, and the fourth house. This is the archetype for today's lesson. This archetype is a very, 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 very beautiful and profound archetype. Now, Cancer is the first of the water signs. And being that it's the first of the water signs, it does represent, in a way, the sum accumulation. looking at your workspace, the fourth house is the fourth house, and it will hold attributes there that will speak of many different parts of your journey within the fourth house. So if you're looking at work, if you have a sun in the fourth house, or maybe even a Mars, for example, yes, we can use Mars for careers, for looking for work, very much so. Jupiter's as well, okay? Jupiter in there is really good. Jupiter is very good for work, as you're going to see. So families, work with home, including, how do you call it, like when you decorate houses, when you guys know what I'm talking about. Anything that has to do with houses, with decorating, with real estate as well. Oh my God, this is like what I most see when it comes to career. If you have any doubts, any questions when it comes to specifically work and career, take real estate into consideration. I see that very prominently, fourth houses, when it has to do with work. Land as well. A lot of activity coming into the fourth house can also indicate the purchase of a house, of a home, of land. Now, keep in mind that land can also be seen in the second house, because the second house, like we saw, is very much earth energy. And this does include land as well. But I think it depends what type of land you're looking for more, because the fourth house is more land of like home, you're establishing yourself, and more of like it's a very solid place. It's a lasting place. So the fourth house can very well address many themes, but at the end of the day, the heart and soul of the fourth house is to be the foundation and the structure that holds the entire chart in place. Now, I made a video, okay, if you're watching this for my mentorship program, I made a video that should be in the bonus folder that is called Water Signs and Spirituality. That's what it's called. And I talk specifically about the fourth house, and I go in depth in there. So in that video, if you want to get just a more in-depth understanding of what the fourth house means, watch that video, because it's full of very valuable information that has to do with the heart and soul of the fourth house. So the heart and soul of the fourth house really is, like, at the end of the day, the core foundational principle. And then from this, you can start building on, and it's easier for you to get an idea. So the fourth house is like I said, the establishment of your identity. And it is a place where you, at the end of the day, you end up expressing yourself from. Because even your midheaven, which is that beautiful visible place of the chart that everybody looks at and everybody sees, that is only held by the foundation of the fourth house. So this is why things that happen in the fourth house impact you very deeply. And if you have a natal planet on your IC, which is even stronger, it's like on the angle, any planets in there on solar return, that planet has a very powerful say in the expression of who you are. Signs in there, the signs on the cusp of your fourth house, on your IC, in your fourth house, signs in there are going to describe a lot about the true expression that you crave for subconsciously. This can also be seen in the moon, but this archetype here, the moon, Cancer, and the fourth house, are very subconscious. A great deal of this is because it has to do with the mother, with family. And so even with the moon, the first, connection that we have with the moon is when we come out from the mother, and that first connection with the mother becomes ingrained in our perception of the world because of our perception and experience with the mother. It's a very subconscious one, because when you come out of the mother, when you come out of the womb, you don't have any programming, let's put it that way. You're very fertile. And that's why the moon is known for being receptive. The sign of Cancer is receptive. I'll use them interchangeably, but it's receptive, the water element, the fourth house, the sign of Cancer. They get impressed very easily. They're very sensitive to their surroundings. So when it comes to the fourth house, the sign in the fourth house and any planets in the fourth house are going to describe very subconscious urges that we have that actually are foundational principles for us to be balanced and whole. So when it comes to the fourth house, it's a very tricky place to work with because it's so deep, it's so subconscious, but yet at the same time, it's so important for us. My goodness, the fourth house is the pillar. It's the what holds the whole chart together. The moon is one of the three main pillars of astrology. In my opinion, the moon is the most important. And if you ask me why, I'll tell you why. It's exactly because of that, because the moon is so receptive, easily impressed. It's so receptive to the surroundings, to the events of life, that from that place, we can either be completely destroyed, or through our experiences, we could rise and we could really master everything else around us and have a really good and wise and solid understanding of life that will then help us express our sun, integrate our experiences through our ascendant, and so forth. So, another reason why I think the moon is important is because when you know someone's moon, at the end of the day, you know their love language. You know exactly how to communicate to them, what's going to appeal to them. Now, of course, there is an integration of the other planets, but the moon is a really important part in knowing someone. When you really want to know someone at the end of the day, look at their fourth house and look at their moon. Okay? The fourth house is going to describe a lot, yes, about their family, their upbringing, there is a lot of values there that pertain to home life for them, things that are important to build a home. Now, if it could be distorted depending on the person's upbringing, but it still will represent values. The sign and the planets in there will indicate values when it comes to family, when it comes to structure for them. So the fourth house is very important, and the moon is going to show you what the person needs at the end of the day in order to feel well. And that will tell you right away if there is any compatibility at all. Because you start with the moon right away, because the moon will show you long-term compatibility. You can have maybe, temporarily compatibility through other ways, but the moon will show you at the end of the day, you can't lie to your emotions for too long without being miserable, at least. So when you find out about someone's moon, I think you find out about their true essence. And to me, that's really important because I like to start from there and then work my way out. And then you find out about the sun and the rising and all that. This is when I want to know someone on a close level, on an intimate level. Okay, not for readings. For readings, that's different. This is like when I really want to understand someone on a deep level. So this would be more like for my personal experiences, let's put it that way. Family, siblings, relationships, friends, even people that you want to work with. So the fourth house is an infinite reservoir of potential. Now, this is a very profound, oh my God, just this in itself, I could write a whole book about it, because if you're coming from the first, second, third house and then integrating those experiences and formulating what you are then going to be expressing through the seventh house, which is going to be the other angle, the descendant, this is where everything is brewing and boiling and concocting. There's something stirring in there, in that fourth house, that is going to blossom. And even if you're just looking at a natal chart, for you to understand what is blossoming in the seventh house or in the other houses, you have to look at what is cooking up there in that pot. in the fourth house. The fourth house is very subconscious, sometimes even for the person itself. So the fourth house becomes that reservoir for new potential. And that's why it's so important to understand the fourth house and work with your fourth house as well. Because the fourth house can hold a lot of damage. Damage from lineage, from family, from home life, from your upbringing as well. And if you live in that pattern, it can influence the way that your expressions come out, your fluids come out. Because then you have all that. This is how you processed everything that happened to you. You process it over here, you process it, and then however it is that you process it, it's going to start coming out through the fifth and the sixth and the seventh. It keeps going. So the fourth house is this reservoir of infinite potential. And when you see something coming up in there, you want to take advantage of it. You want to get to know that planet on a deep level because the potential of that planet is really strong, especially if it's nurtured. So that's the function of the fourth house, and that's why everything cooks up in there and boils in there, because it's the fertile ground. It's the nurturing place, and this is why it's the womb. The fourth house is the place where we nurture a project, a child, a family, a job, an idea, a part of our personality. It depends what you're looking for in your chart. But the fourth house is the part where you nurture that. So, okay, ancestral and environmental influences as well, big one. Environmental influences would be more for upbringing, especially your home life. The sign, the sign is going to describe the quality of your environment. This is so a given. Okay, if you have a Capricorn over there, there's going to be something about your home life or about your mother as well that represents that Capricorn energy. If it's ruled by Venus, whether it's Taurus or Libra, yes, generally speaking, it can hold the qualities of Venus in there, but let's not make the mistake to just look at the sign. We're going to learn further down the line that the ruler of that sign is going to add information. So if it's Venus, let's say your house is ruled by Libra, look at the quality of your Venus. The reason why I say that is because I've seen so many people that I've done chart readings for that have Libra or Taurus in the fourth house, and they had a really rough upbringing. Their Venus said it all. Their Venus was heavily afflicted, and the Venus told the story. But still, at the end of the day, this will describe the values, the Venusian values, whether it's from Taurus that we learned already, which is that stability, that abundance, right? The creativity, the fertility. These are values that are important to them. But the sign there will describe aspects of your upbringing. For example, I have an Aquarius, I see. And Aquarius is known for being a very erratic energy. It's very unpredictable, but it's also very spiritual one as well. So this is where the activations come, and it's a very charged energy here with the Aquarius. And Aquarius perfectly describes my early environment, my early upbringing, my early family life, which was being brought up in a cult. Very different, very unusual. I was born and raised with a bunch of people. That was my upbringing. This was my home life. And then we moved from place to place because the shepherds, the leadership, the hierarchy of the group, it was like this strategy game, and they would like just tell people where to go. We never settled in a place for more than a year or a year and a half because every time we did, we had to relocate again. So Aquarius describes not only my very unusual upbringing, my very erratic, unpredictable, okay, now you have to move now, crazy, revolutionary as well, very fanatic. I mean, it described everything about my upbringing. So the sign on your rising will describe a lot about your upbringing, but this is your experience of your upbringing, your perception of your upbringing. Very important to keep in mind, because I have 5 siblings and they have different. Actually, I have one more brother that also has an Aquarius, I see. But the rest, they have different signs. So they had different experiences of their upbringing. So the sign will describe your experience of your upbringing, of your environmental influences, like I said, and ancestral as well. Ancestral, very important when you're doing deep work with people. If you work with DNA, if you work with family lineages, it's all ancestral, all seen in the fourth house. You can even go back to past lives and see a lot there when it comes to family lineage. So fourth house is also very good for that. So now let's see, the place, the fourth house, the moon, Cancer, this is the place where we feel emotion. So this is a very important concept to understand. Have you ever heard people saying that Cancer, the signs of Cancer, are very moody or very unpredictable? Like sometimes it can be very nice, sometimes it can be very cold. The reason for this is because they're very emotional in nature. The moon as well. So even when I talk about Cancer, I am talking about any planets that you may have in the sign of Cancer, especially if they are Mercury, Venus, and Mars. So when I talk about Cancer, I'm talking about any planets that you have in Cancer. And when I talk about the moon, I am talking here especially not just the moon alone, but if you have any planets conjunct your moon, that planet is going to really be an important part of your emotional identity. If we're talking about Saturn, we're talking about a moon and Saturn. Saturn is a very important part of your emotional identity. If it's Uranus, Uranus is a very important part of your emotional identity. So that's what I mean when I say the moon and Cancer. They're also very receptive. So that means that any planets in Cancer or any planets conjunct the moon are going to really express those qualities on a deep level. So if you have, let's say, a Mercury, for example, Mercury in Cancer, how do you connect a Mercury with the emotional side of Cancer? Cancer is really deep. It's a deep sign. It perceives deeply. It feels deeply. Well, Mercury is the mind. And so the mind will operate in a deep way for the most part. They work really well with emotions. They're emotional learners. They learn a lot through feeling, through experiences. And the planets that are conjunct the moon, they will become the part of the emotional identity. So the moon receives the qualities of that planet. It receives really easily like a sponge, just like the sign of Cancer. So planets in there, they become like a sponge in the sign of Cancer. And they express themselves in a very emotional way. If it's a Mars, it's very emotional. If it's a Venus as well, oh my gosh, very emotional. And also, we're going to look at some other qualities of Cancer. But the emotional aspect is the primary foundational expression of the water element. You have an experience, a direct experience, it produces an emotion, so you remember longer. Let's say that Mars is telling a very sad story and it went through a lot of trauma. The emotional memory from that Mars becomes very ingrained and imprinted more easily than if that Mars was in Gemini. So planets in Cancer, for example, the imprint becomes much greater than the imprint from the air signs, for example, okay, or the fire signs. It just comes and goes. The water signs, it not only absorbs easily, that's why they're so emotional, they're so receptive, but it retains as well. It retains the information. So the memory in there can be very tricky to work with. If you're working with someone on counseling or even with yourself, you want to make sure that any aspects to those planets that may be harsh, like a square or an opposition, we're going to see what all those means in the next part. These planets, you want to make sure that you really understand the story behind them and really work with integrating their experiences. Otherwise, they can become emotional signatures in you really strong, and you can repeat those patterns for a long time. On the other hand, if they're good patterns, if it's a happy Mars, my God, the emotional memory there, it's the exact same. It's strong, it's the strongest, and it's the most lasting one as well. So, planets in Cancer are very, very interesting to work with. And when it comes to the moon, like I said, you want to look at any planets that are conjunct the moon, because those planets, not only they become a part of your emotional identity, but they also become a very important part for your emotional receptivity. This means that it becomes a very important thing in your experience for you to have those qualities. The sign of the moon and any planets that are conjunct the moon. Very important for your emotional experience. Now, yes, there are many variables here. Maybe your moon will be afflicted, there will be other planets involved. So the moon is going to tell more of the story. It's going to show if you really are experiencing all those qualities. Like, let's say the Saturn. You have a moon and Saturn conjunction. At the end of the day, you need that emotional stability, that security, that sense of solid, either a routine or a person or just something that is solid. It depends a lot on the house that it's in as well. It's going to add what it is that you crave, and how to go about it. But any planets in there is going to add information. So if it's Saturn, it's going to add that sense of respect, sense of authority, right? Of stability, of consistency. Of course, a lot of other things. But if that Saturn, or whatever planet you're looking at here, I'm just using Saturn as an example, if it's not well integrated, it can also be a big emotional memory baggage that you carry with you because of that emotional imprint. So then you would look at the challenging sides of Saturn, which is being cold, standoffish, or just being more sober, more serious, just having that over sense of duty and responsibility. There are many ways that it can express, or being too rigid. And that's why it's important to know the two polarities of the planets, the signs, because you want to know if your moon at the end of the day is happy. Understanding the moon is key to understanding yourself. When I found out what my moon sign was, and I was like, oh my God, really? This is what I need at the end of the day? Like, that was such a big revelation for me. I was like, wow, that is so cool. Like, now I can eliminate this, that. Like, now I know exactly. And the moon will show you exactly at the end of the day what you need to have emotional stability. And everybody needs something different. Even the people that need freedom, and lots of move and change, they need those qualities to have emotional stability. So understanding someone's moon is really important to understanding their love language and their true needs at the end of the day. So understanding the moon sign also will add information, the house it's in. Okay, obviously the fourth house is going to complement that. You want to look at both of them. But the moon at the end of the day does describe the mother factor in your life and how that comes into play in your life, in your early upbringing, your first impression of the mother, your experiences with the mother, which then ends up influencing not only your emotional approach, but also your relationship with women in the future. So that's how crazy it is and how everything is so interconnected. But literally, your experience with the mother, as denoted by the sign, denoted by any planets that are there as well, any aspects to the planets, which we're going to learn about later, those are all going to describe your experience with the mother, your impressions of the mother, whether they were positive or negative or challenging, or they're going to be a little bit of both each. Usually they're like a little bit of everything here. But after that comes the development of your own emotional expression. So, based on your relationship with your mother, you're going to start to form your perception of reality. Now, it doesn't mean that you're going to be exactly like your mother, or if your mother treated you mean, you're going to be mean to everybody. But let's say that if you have, for example, a Capricorn moon, Capricorn moons usually does denote a distant relationship with the mother for whatever reason. Um, and it doesn't mean that you yourself will be distant. It could be. But the other polarity of Capricorn is that solid figure. It really is that dependable figure. So it could be that those hardships with the mother either taught you to be self sufficient, self reliable, because you didn't have mommy around, or you could have developed the other polarity, which is you became cold and hard yourself, or you could just have already outgrown all those cycles and already be in the solid, dependable, respectable emotional polarity of expression. So it's important to understand that your relationship with the mother and the home life, as well as seen by the fourth house, will describe the potential for your emotional foundation, the things that you will later on value in life as well, and that will become a strong part of your identity. So because of this, the moon will continue to represent the mother, yes, but also your experiences with women in your life, other female figures. The moon is very good for seeing other women in your chart, especially if it has to do with older women. Younger women usually can be seen by Venus, and the moon will be older women, wives, mothers. I will recommend that you look at both Venus and the moon. You'll always look at both, especially if you're unsure, but it's almost without fail that the moon represents older women. Now, the moon is the queen of the zodiac, right? Whereas the sun is the king, the moon is the queen. And the moon does have its own light as well. The sun shines during the day, but the moon shines at night. So the moon does shine a light, and it does have that prestigious, elevated status. And the moon is a very strong planet in astrology. So if you're working with a chart and you're working, for example, with a 10th house moon, even though the moon is a very subconscious part of our nature, it's a very tender and emotional, don't minimize the strength of the moon, because the moon is the queen, and it does shine its light in a very strong way, very powerful way. It's subconscious, but it shines. So if you're seeing a moon in the 10th house, this is the throne. The 10th house is the throne. It's the highest point of visibility for the moon, for the queen. There's something very significant about your intuition, obviously your emotional nature. Your relationship with your mother was very significant. Your mother was probably a very strong woman as well. When the moon is highly placed or strongly placed, conjunct an angle, for example, these are really powerful placements for the moon, and it adds a lot of strength to your moon, to your emotional identity, your emotional expression. So let's not forget that the moon is the queen, and the moon does shine its own light as well. Now, the moon will explore the world through feeling, just like the sign of Cancer does, just like the fourth house does. It's all about feeling. So when the moon travels through the zodiac, especially through progressions, oh my God, progressed moons are such an amazing thing to keep track of. It's exploring the world, the realms, the houses. through the emotions. So that's why it becomes such an active place, because you become emotionally aware of it. And so it becomes highlighted. And that's why the moon, the progressed moon, is so important in your chart. It can show you so much. The transiting moon moves way too fast, I think, for us to, I think we have too much of a limited understanding right now to keep track of the transiting moon in a very precise way. The transiting moon is very tricky to work with. So, but the progressed moon is what you want to look at. And the area of the life that the progressed moon is covering, the house, the sign, if it's conjuncting any planets, it's absorbing all that energy into its awareness, into its emotional awareness. And then everything that comes into our awareness at some point comes out into our expression as well. So keeping track of the progressed moon is really important. A very good thing to do. I think one of the most reliable and profound ways to keep track of your cycles is the progressed moon. It's amazing what just the progressed moon can show you. And the progressed moon, that's why I always say the progressed moon is like a ticker, like a pointer that just kind of goes activating certain things in your chart. And the reason for that is because of that emotional factor. The moon becomes emotionally aware, emotionally aware, emotionally aware. And as it does, it triggers those things in your chart. Now, when we're dealing with the natal moon, let's remember that this is showing what you long for at the end of the day. Whether that, Taurus moon that you have is happy or not, it is what you long for at the end of the day. So understanding the qualities of the sign of your moon is very important for understanding yourself and others. When the moon is poorly placed in a chart, unhappy, okay, full of harsh aspects and all that, these people, they may want to deny their past as well. This is a form of closing your emotions. Fourth house as well, when you have too many harsh planets in there and it's just home life, it's just a hard place for you. We may live in denial. People may live in denial of their relationship with the mother, the home aspect, the intimate aspect of their personality, because that's what it is as well. Very personal space. Very personal space. All the water houses, all the water signs are intimate. But the fourth house and the sign of Cancer and the moon is very intimate in the sense that it's subconscious. It's a very instinctual one as well. The 8th house Scorpio and the 12th house in Pisces, they're not so instinctual like the 4th house, because the 4th house has a very protecting instinct. Not only it's the first of the water signs, okay, it's still very much in the early development of the personality phase, but it's got the instinctual aspect from the mother wanting to nurture, wanting to take care. Because the purpose and the function of the 4th house and the sign of Cancer and the moon is to nurture. And so this whole 4th house, the whole womb area is like an incubator. It's a place that holds something that is meant to be nurtured into fertility, which would be the 5th house, right? The children, creativity, expression. We're going to see that next. But the 4th house needs to, first of all, needs to have something to nurture. So the sign of Cancer loves to nurture. The 4th house loves to, people that have strong moons, strong Cancers, like a Venus in Cancer, a Sun in Cancer, 4th house as well. These people, they'll just naturally be they're so intuitive with other people's feelings, their emotions, that they naturally become aware of what people need, if they're thirsty, if they're well, are you okay? And that's why they can come across as very caring or very sweet. But it's just really that they're so intuitive. They're so intuitive. They're so empathic. They're so emotionally aware. Let's say that. They're so emotionally aware. Now, it doesn't mean they're emotionally intelligent. this is the thing here. All water signs are very emotionally based. And when we're emotional and we're not, having a good day, emotions can be expressed very strongly. So it depends on the level of intelligence of your that planet in Cancer in the fourth house as well, or even with your moon, that will describe how it will express itself when it doesn't get its way. Because if it's not emotionally intelligent, the sign of Cancer can be very problematic. It can throw fits. It can be very problematic. And the reason for this is because, very interestingly enough, the same way that the sign of Cancer and this archetype, the moon, fourth house, it needs to nurture. It also needs to be nurtured. And that's why we have that duality, right, with the Cancer, the moodiness. This is the two polarities of the Cancer. Like, it needs to nurture, but it also needs to be nurtured. So it longs for this sense of security as well. And this sense of security can be provided in many different ways. The sense of security can be seen by the sign placement, any planets over there, okay? And the sense of security can be seen through emotions, through words. Let's say if it's Gemini, or if you're dealing with Mercury, freedom, if it's Sagittarius, Aquarius, Uranus. There will be many things that will describe what is important for the emotional security. Whether we are looking at a person that will represent and bring those attributes for the emotional security, or whether we're looking for situation in the person's environment that they need in order to have that subconscious and then conscious sense of security. We're talking here about needs. And when we're talking about needs, it's a very touchy thing. It's a very deep thing. So the moon the fourth house does represent needs. It does crave, it does long for things. And when it doesn't receive the security that it's looking for, or the things that it needs, or that it wants, the sign of Cancer can definitely be loud. And the interesting thing is that because they are so intuitive, they're so perceptive as well, and they know exactly, like, they can manipulate people too, because and sometimes they don't even do it on purpose, but it's like they can feel people so well. They're so intuitive that they can use that to their advantage. So they'll either throw guilt trips or just throw tantrums. The more unintelligent ones are just going to throw total tantrums, and the more intelligent ones will do it in a more silent way. Cancers, when they're offended, they're known for giving you the cold shoulder. So this is why, again, we have the duality here with the Cancer. You can either be really warm, because here's the nurturing aspect of it. They're really good at the nurturing. But if they don't feel safe in the environment, or if they're not getting their needs met, or if they don't feel secure, they're going to close. And this is the survival aspect, the very instinctual aspect that I was talking about with the fourth house and the sign of Cancer. They're very instinctual. It's like, oh, I don't feel safe. Close down. Either close down or attack. And that's why Cancers can be very, hard people as well. If they're hardened, they can be hard. Let's remember that the fourth house is an angle. The sign of Cancer is a cardinal sign. They can attack too. They initiate things. So in this way, Cancer, the sign of Cancer, or like suns in the fourth house, for example, they can be really strong personalities. And they can be very moved and motivated to excel in their professions, to whatever it is that they do. They will excel, but they're moved by the principle of security, the principle of feeling safe and providing safety and security to those they love, their families. They're usually very protective as well. And they can be very jealous as well. But that is because of that instinct of not only nurturing, but also, having their needs met. Having, like, let's say that we're dealing with something. Okay, maybe not even a person, maybe we're dealing with an object, and it's something that is sentimental to them. These people will hold on to it, like, and they can, if things can get really hard and really ugly with them when they hold on to things. When they hold on to people, they can get very jealous, manipulative. And this comes, it's a very similar energy to Taurus, but Taurus is more of like a fixed energy. So it's expressed in a different way and it's moved by different principles. But Cancer is moved by the security to have and to also to protect. So if you mess with that, they'll attack. They'll attack. But they'll also be really good go-getters, be really good leaders as well. Cancer signs, suns in the fourth house, these people can be really good leaders too. So let's see if we have, okay, feelings are worn on their sleeves. This over here is great for the moon. Depending on the moon's placement of your chart, if it's on the rising, oh my God, I always say that. If you have a moon in your first house, which is like everybody sees, you wear your emotions on your sleeve. And really, like in any angle, it's a very strong place for the moon. The fourth house, it tends to be a little more private. It's easier to be more behind the scenes. These people prize their distance from time to time and their personal space, but it's still a very strong place. And also in the upper half of the chart, especially in the seventh house, in the ninth house, in the 10th house, and in the 11th house. The 12th house as well, but the 12th house can be a little more unconscious, so it's a little bit different. But really, the whole entire upper half of your chart, and the first house as well, because it's the entrance into the world, with a moon in there, in your natal chart, progress chart, solar return, lunar return, you are wearing your emotional identity on your sleeve. It's like what you're feeling, everybody knows, especially in the first house and the 10th house. I didn't say the 8th house for a reason. The 8th house is very, very, very private, as you're going to see. It is also public, but when you're having the moon, which is already a subconscious place, when it's in the water houses, it tends to remain in there, and it takes a little more of a nudging. When it comes to other people being aware of your emotional nature, the whole top half of your chart is a very exposed place. So to have your moon, especially on the midheaven, this is like your moon, your emotional nature longs and craves for the public attention, for that seat, that high seat of the throne, for the recognition in your work, right? For just an elevated status, even if it's a noble one. This is and it is a place where your emotional nature is expressed in a very obvious way, in a very public way as well. Now, these people can also be really like mother figures. They can have a really beautiful heart for others, for the people they work with. So it can be a very good placement for the moon. This archetype is very caring. The sign of Cancer, the fourth house, they can be very traditional as well. They can like traditional music, traditional decoration, just traditional things, but they're also very loyal. They treasure and cherish that like family tradition. Like they understand the principle of foundation. And that's why family is so important to them. You know, home is important to them as well. Now, when they don't get their way, they can use guilt and manipulation. They can be moody because they are so receptive and perceptive to their surroundings. So they can change very easily depending on what their antennas capture. They can also be considered hypersensitive because of that. They can also be hypersensitive just because they are very emotional themselves. And if they're struggling emotionally themselves, then yeah, they're going to also be hypersensitive. But they can also be intuitively hypersensitive. They can be hypersensitive to the ethers. So there's many levels of hypersensitivity here. Planets in Cancer, they need safety, whether it's physical, whether it's emotional, whether it's mental. They all have a need for security. Reassurance for the sign of Cancer is very comforting. Very comforting. They are very caring to others, to the needs of others. And this can make them, or your moon, if you have a strong moon in the 10th house, for example, this can make you a very caring person by nature. This can be reflected in your work. You can come across with those qualities if you have, let's say, a sun in Cancer, a sun in the 4th house. This is what you can exude, especially if it's healthy, if it's happy. You express these qualities in a very big way. Now, in the same way that you express it, you also have a degree of needing them, needing that safety, needing that caring. And it's important to keep that in balance, in check, because the function of Cancer really is to nurture life, to nurture something. And these people, these planets that you have, people that have a strong moon placement, they are here to be nurturers of others, nurturers of life, nurturers in their field. And it's a very beautiful, beautiful gift that they have. But on the other hand, if they're not balanced within, they cannot nurture and they cannot give. So understanding the qualities of the 4th house, right? That would mean planets in the 4th house, the sign of Cancer, planets in Cancer, and the moon, the function of the moon, the sign of the moon that represents, at the end of the day, your core urge nature. All these three are so important to understand in your chart. And these are really, really, really the foundation, especially the 4th house, the IC, and the moon. Okay, those, the IC and the moon, those are foundational principles of your being. They're core rooted aspects of who you are as an identity. And understanding the sign on your IC, the sign on your moon, just those two alone, even if you don't even think about the planets right now, but just understanding the sign on your IC and the sign on your moon, this is going to help to add so much information about your emotional identity and of others. Now we get to the IC. And here we cover the archetype of the moon, Cancer, and the 4th house. So the IC is the second angle that we're looking at here. The first one was the ascendant point. We went in depth into that, really looking at that as the point of entrance of the soul into the world. But right now we are in the stage, or the stages, if we will, where the soul is developing the ego. The purpose really of this journey really is to know itself. And at some point of the journey, we transcend the ego. The transcendence of the ego is found in the 12th house, and the sign of Pisces corresponds to that. So it really, again, we're following here the cycle of the evolution, and this is the journey of the soul, and the soul enters into the world through the ascendant point. And it goes through these initial stages that we've already looked at, the first house, then the second house, then the third house, developing these different aspects of the personality. And that's why these archetypes of Aries, Mars, first house, Venus, Taurus, second house, Mercury, Gemini, third house, and even now, Moon, Cancer, fourth house. These signs, these four signs especially, they're very much correlated to the mundane aspects of our personality, of our ego. Why? Because this is the stage. These are the stages that we are developing the ego. And it brings us finally to the fourth house, the IC. And the fourth house is the realm of the ego. The moon is the ego. This is where we become hyper aware of our personality. This is where we begin to develop emotions. So, the IC is the beginning place of all of that. Not only it's the cusp of the fourth house, so it's got that very tender, sensitive spot. It holds that sensitive spot in the fourth house, the sensitive spot where when something crosses there, when something enters there by progression, by transit, it rocks your world. Why is that? Well, before we look into the archetype, let's just take into consideration for a moment here the IC. And this beginning place, the starting point of the fourth house, the IC, is also the equivalent to the structure and the foundation of the entire chart. This is a very profound thing, my God, because whenever you have a progression, a transit, a solar return with any planet that is conjunct your IC, this is something that is impacting you on a deep level or going to impact you on a deep level. This is the structure and the foundation of your personality here on Earth, your human persona. Things that happen to the IC, they tend to touch you on such a deep level of existence that it can rock the foundations of your life for, let's say, that year if you're looking at a cycle. And depending on what the planet is and what the transit or the progression is, this is something that can rock your world and change your life as a consequence as well. Because the IC is a very intimate space. This is where life for you is held. The structure of your chart is held by that IC. Now, isn't it interesting that the sign that holds that domain there is Cancer, the mother, the ultimate sign of femininity, receptivity, the mother. These are all attributes of the sign of Cancer, and Cancer is the one that at the end of the day holds that spot. The one that represents the internal structure and foundation of your chart, of your life. So I think I mentioned this on the video of this archetype, but I want to recommend that you watch if you're able to, if you are part of the mentorship program. This video should be free in the bonus folder. I have a video that I address the four houses, the three water houses in spirituality. So here we are, we're looking at the sign of Pisces, Scorpio, and Cancer, and the houses 4th, 8th, and 12th. And this video, I address these water houses in spirituality, and I talk extensively about this concept of the IC and the importance of this place in someone's chart, how things that happen here happen on a soul level, they impact you on a core level. Because the IC is the root of your soul. This is where your chart is rooted. It's rooted and grounded into the fourth house. And this is why the fourth house is considered the womb, is considered the home, the mother, the family. This is where it all originates. This is what creates the scenery for you to develop your perception of the world. And mind you, everything that happens on an external level, on the surface, aka the 10th house, is really only just a reflection of the polarity, what's on the other end, on the fourth house, the IC. So understanding someone's sign on the fourth house on the IC really is everything to understanding them on a core level. There are key things you want to do to understand someone on a core level. You're going to see one of them is the South Node. The South Node is going to show you so much about someone's true nature on a core level because this is coming from past lives with them. The moon is another very important aspect for understanding someone on a core level. And a sign on the fourth house, on the IC. The sign on the cusp, even if there's only 2 degrees left or 1 degree left, look at the sign on the cusp of the fourth house. The qualities of that sign are going to describe the internal makeup of your structure, your emotional structure. And your moon will describe your internal nature, who you really are, because this is based on your perceptions of who you are now that you've reached this stage of life. You have your perception of what you need now. Now I know. It's like that young teenager, that just like started growing its first little hair, facial hairs and thinks it's an adult. And so I know what I'm going to do, and I know who I'm going to marry, and I know what I'm going to be. That's the moon. That's the fourth house. So it brings that I know what I need, and the moon knows what it needs, and it needs it really strong. And your moon sign is, as you're going to see, it works directly with your soul as well. And so even what you need at the end of the day, your emotional needs, they do serve a purpose, and understanding someone's moon is understanding them on a deep level. You are understanding their emotional needs, and you're understanding them beyond any masks from the sun, from Mars, any planets in the first house. Okay, because maybe some people, they have a very expressive and fiery first house ascendant, or Mars, or these, or even a Venus. But let's say that their moon is in the tender 12th house, or their moon is in a soft water sign, or maybe even a beautiful, let's say, a earthy sign, maybe even the Taurus that can be a little more laid back, or understanding what you really crave at the end of the day. Do you crave the silence of the 12th house, the occasional solitude, the hermit mode? Or do you even um, desire or need at the end of the day for your emotional balance and well being the stillness of the realms, let's say, for example, of Pisces, or even Taurus, that likes the stability, is not so much about moving around or changing. When you understand someone's true emotional nature, it doesn't matter how their ascendant comes across. They can be a fiery ascendant, or they can be a funny Gemini ascendant. Maybe it's a mask, and not a mask in the sense that it's not really them, but it's just something that comes easy to them. And hey, it doesn't mean that they feel that way or that they're happy doing that. Maybe they're putting on a show or making people laugh because that's just what they always do. They help make people happy, but does that mean that they feel happy inside? What is it that they really need at the end of the day? That's seen by the moon. And the sign on your IC, on the cusp of your fourth house, can also very well complement that. And what you need, as indicated by the sign on the fourth house, is not so much even what you are conscious of that what you need, because the moon is a little bit easier for you to be conscious. You know, if it's Libra, you need harmony, you need balance and justice. If it's Aries, you need something dynamic, activity, you need fire, passion. But the fourth house becomes a little bit more unconscious. It's still very much a part of the person's internal structure and what is important to them, but they may not be so consciously aware of it. Many people will be, but not everybody, because it's a very deep thing. So, this is like the early upbringing at home with families, family values, family dynamics that become ingrained in the person's value systems and as a core principle in their expression and the foundation of their personality. So, the first house initiates, enters the world, right, is led by the impulses of the instinctual nature. Then you reach the second house and you begin to discover what you have and then what you want. And then in the third house, you begin to expand your horizons like we saw. You get curious, you see the world, you get out there, you um, mingle, you connect, you explore. Then you are flexible, you transmute, you change, and then you enter the fourth house. Boom, to germinate there in that womb. And the purpose of the fourth house is to nurture. Yes, it definitely is the place of the mother. It definitely is very instinctual. But from a developing a personality perspective, the fourth house is the house where you gather all of your experiences in the first, second, and third houses through that cycle. And you assimilate them through what is now seen as emotions. Now, mind you, this is the first of the water elements. The first. So here we have a very infant stage of getting to know this side of the personality called emotions. We're still going to go through the Scorpio, eighth house archetype, and then the 12th house. So there are other stages of the emotions, but this here is the very first one. So it's still very instinctual. It's still very much an infant. And Cancer's purpose is to know itself through emotion. So, whereas we have the fire, then we have the grounding of the earth, then we have the dispersing of the air, and now we have the nurturing waters of the emotions. And the emotions are meant to be able to process those three stages of life and come to a certain degree of awareness, of evolution, as imprinted by the emotions, by the soul, right? That comes in. It's supposed to come in through the moon, that soul factor. But emotions really are at the end of the day the true characteristic here of the moon, of the sign of the Cancer element. And it is through the emotional nature that we come to know the side of life that we call spirit. So here we have intuition, here we have psychic activity. People that have, for example, suns, moons in the fourth house, here we are bringing the element of water. It is the same archetype we're taking into consideration. So it would be like if you had a Cancer moon or Cancer sun as well. So, strong fourth houses, there is a focus on mother, intuition, receptivity, but it still is a very fertile one. It still is in a very discovery mode. So, in this sense, the fourth house is still very instinctual nature, very instinctual. The sign of Cancer, very instinctual. And this is why I've heard so many people ask, why is Cancer considered a cardinal sign? It's water. You don't really associate it with initiating. Usually think of like a masculine thing, right? To initiate, cardinal. Well, yes, okay. We are taking into consideration the water element, which is passive, it's receptive, it's feminine. But when you bring the energy of initiating from the cardinal element into the mixture with the water, this can be some of the most passionate leaders ever. Because when these types are moved to take action, they can go very far. Because when it's based on emotion, it doesn't water down very quickly. It doesn't die down very quickly. Now, of course, we want to make sure that the emotions aren't a very fluctuating type in nature, right? But we do know that when you are passionate about something and that fire is there, that fuel is there, that passion is there, this does bring a charge, and that charge combined with the initiative of the cardinal element can really make some amazing leaders. Now, speaking of action and activity when it comes to this archetype, fourth houses and Cancer, and the sign of Cancer, these are also moved by instincts, and they have a very sharp, instinctual nature. And this is still, the early development stages of the ego, and so it is very survival based, but it's there and it serves a purpose. So these strong types here are moved to protect, provide. And again, these things can move them to be some great leaders out there, own some very successful businesses and be very productive in their work, but really primarily because they are moved to protect and provide, create an atmosphere of security for themselves, their loved ones. And this archetype here of Cancer, they can be some amazing uh, parents, caretakers, providers. Now, of course, when it's unbalanced, we want to keep it in check because the other aspect, the other polarity of Cancer is Capricorn. And so when this archetype does get wounded because it's emotional, it can close off and it can bounce off on that Capricorn polarity and to be really closed, can be very stern, but really because there are, let's say, preventing themselves from hurting their feelings again. Let's put it that way. But what if the person's north node is in the Cancer sign or in the house of this archetype, the fourth house? Then this is something that the soul needs to experience, the sense of nurturing or the ability to nurture others. Themes that are related to family, to parents, to mother, to creating and experiencing their own family, home. These are all themes that are very healthy from a soul perspective. So it really depends on what it is that you're looking at in Cancer in the fourth house. Or if you're looking at your moon, you're looking at a place in your life that you need to experience connection with in order to feel safe, to feel happy, to feel well. Your moon sign is going to indicate a quality of your needs? More passive? Is it more active? Is it an air sign? Is it a water sign? Just by determining the elements, you can already see so much. Then you want to see what sign it is. Are there any planets conjunct your moon? What house is it in? These are all very important elements that are going to describe what you need in order to experience security, well being, but it's also going to show your own emotional dynamics, your own emotional realities. A moon conjunct Saturn is very different than a moon conjunct Uranus. Anything conjunct the moon, as a matter of fact, is very, very receptive, and it becomes ingrained as an emotional identity. So if it's Mercury, your need to communicate, your need to express yourself, to connect with others is very strong. Maybe you're more of the introvert type, and maybe you direct this energy to learning, to studies. But the need, it's there. And so whatever planet is there with the moon is going to really become an ingrained part of your emotional needs nature. So the function of this archetype of the fourth house of Cancer, of the moon, is to, at the end of the day, give you personal identity. After all is said and done, after the first, after the second, after the third, then you're like, okay, now I know what I want. Now I know who I am. So it really is in the fourth house that we develop our sense of ego. It really is with the moon that we develop our sense of ego. This is our self image. This is how we see ourselves because this is what we feel we need, who we are. I am a Pisces moon. I am tender. I am compassionate. This is how you see yourself. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's how other people see you. It doesn't mean that it correlates with how you are expressing yourself. You may have a very beautiful, tender Pisces moon, but if if that Pisces moon in the 12th house is coupled with an Aries ascendant, and a Mars in the first house, just to exaggerate things here a little bit, that person is going to be coming across definitely as something very different than it perceives itself to be. It perceives itself to be a soft soul, and gentle, and it just needs to get away from the bad world. It needs time to rest. Nobody understands it. Oh, that poor Pisces moon. It's so tender. Oh my gosh. So sensitive. But it comes across, it expresses itself with that leadership, authority, fire, superimposing proactiveness of Aries, and Mars in there definitely doesn't help it. Doesn't help water things down. So this is where understanding the difference of the archetypes starts to add value to your chart interpretation, because when you understand the function of the moon, and that the function of the moon is to give you your sense of ego, then you understand that the moon is actually a very important part of the chart, and maybe even more important than the ascendant, depending on what your purpose is in looking at their chart. If you really want to get to know someone's personality, the moon is where it's at. If you really want to know the internal structure and makeup and foundation of someone's blueprint, you look at the IC, the sign of the IC. Those are going to determine really who someone is at a core level. After all the cute little poems and songs and smiley faces, when you go home with the person and you spend time and you get to know the person, you're going to get to know their moon and the sign of their IC. That is their true self, at least from a personality and ego perspective. Because again, remember the function of this archetype is to develop the emotional awareness. You're supposed to develop the ego, the understanding of the personality at this stage. At this stage, you've gone through the birth, the baby steps, the toddler, infancy, and now you are here. You're aware, you're emotionally aware. So, the purpose of this place is to find emotional security and to give the emotional security, but most especially to have that identification with the ego, who I am. You want to make someone happy, talk to them about their moon. And even if you don't even use astrology, let's say that you're getting someone with a Scorpio moon. You don't even have to tell them about astrology, even though Scorpio moon will probably be interested in knowing. But if you just know that at the end of the day, who they are is a deep soul and they prize and cherish deep connections. And they can go deep and see beneath the surface like no other. These people, they definitely have a lot more than meets the eye. They can be mysterious, sensual, intriguing, passionate, charismatic. It all depends on the rest of their chart. But when you understand that this is really a part of who they are, you can meet them and speak to them on that level and address those themes and tell them that you see that part of them. You know who they are on a deep level, and they will be your best friends. They'll be like, oh my God, finally, this person knows me and gets me. Because when you are looking at someone's moon, you are looking at what they perceive to be their true nature. And these are the core stabilizing dynamics that hold their personality in place. This is their ego. The moon really will show you someone's inner child. This is that tender part of them that most people don't see at face value. So when you see that, when you see their inner child, you acknowledge their need to be nurtured by dot dot dot. Oh my God, people are going to love you for it. And of course, most important of all, when you find what your inner child needs to feel safe and nurtured, and your your life changes. I know mine did. I had a wave of ease and just relief sweep over me when I really truly understood what I needed. And I know it sounds pathetic, but I'm a seventh house sun, a Libra moon in the 11th house. It's all about people. And so it's all about the feedback. It used to be in my life before. And when you have thousands of different people telling you different things, you don't really know what you need at the end of the day to be happy. Especially like me, growing up in a cult, always surrounded by people being told what to do, it can be really confusing. And when I saw my chart, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm like, this is not my dad saying what I need. This is not, the Bible saying what I need. This is not my teacher saying what I need. Like, this is my blueprint. This is what I need. Yes. Ah, a wave of relief swept over me. And this is what you can experience as well when you get to know your moon. Get to know your inner child, other people's inner childs, and what they need to be nurtured by the moon, because this is the function of this archetype. The fourth house, this is your inner space. What does someone need at the end of the day? After the parties, after the cute little social activities you find in the third house, what is the quality of your inner space? This is very important to understand core values here for the person. This is a part of their personality on a core level. So, this archetype is going to describe someone's inner nature and someone's self image. So, it is a very self oriented place here. You can see for sure self image, the inner nature, the image of self, the inner space. This is a personal, and it's supposed to be. Anything that comes here in the space is very personal. If someone, let's say that you have an Aries in here in your fourth house. People that have an Aries sun, an Aries moon, an Aries rising, these people are going to match your fourth house because that's where Aries is in for you. So these people, anything that enters your fourth house impacts you very deeply, as I talked about before. And this includes people as well. I can't tell you how many times I personally have seen charts between two people and one or both of them that have a sun or a moon or like a significant strong point in the other person's fourth house. The person with the fourth house receiving those planets in there in their fourth house, this impacts them so deeply that I've seen it so many times. This person have a reaction like, oh, this is my soulmate, or I feel like I know them from a past life. And maybe they do, every situation is going to be different. But when someone enters your something or someone enters your fourth house, it impacts you deeply, very deeply. So remember that this space over here is the root of your being. Let's take into the context here, into consideration, the whole context of the wheel. This is the evolutionary stage of man knowing itself. So the first initial steps is the personality. And we do have still a whole lot of other houses to explore and other stages to explore, including the stages of the soul. But this stage is the first stage. It's that awareness of the soul, and it starts with the ego. I have emotions, soul. Emotions is definitely a very beautiful gift, and it definitely is a very powerful way to access our intuition and spirit. But it's still ego, and so we want to be careful here at the end of the day to make sure that we are consciously aware of the emotions that are coming in and out, because this is still a very primal space. We are dealing with instincts, instincts to protect, instincts to survive, instincts to provide. So when these instincts are not met, or when they are felt threatened for any reason, there can be displays of closing off, or, for example, some of the challenges here with this archetype is you can find some cancers or fourth house, strong fourth houses that go to the other extreme and close themselves entirely. And they can even be mean. But this is really, at the end of the day, most of the times it's the ultimate cry for help, because these are this archetype here, the Cancer sign, is extremely dependent and codependent when it's unbalanced. When it's unbalanced, it's very dependent, because this archetype here, the Cancer, it needs to provide, to protect, but it also needs to be protected and provided for. So with this, it can generate an unbalance of neediness. And when it doesn't get its way, like we talked about in the video, this archetype here, fourth house Cancer, it can be quite hard and throw a fit and act like a brat, and then nobody knows why. So there is the these two polarities here of expression, but the intention from a soul perspective is to experience emotions so that eventually, through the emotions, it can come to know itself as a soul. So, this is a very intuitive space, yes. Depending on the person you're working with, the chart you're looking at, this can be a very intuitive place. The moon is very psychically receptive. It's a place that it's in the in between realms. Okay, the moon is the conscious and unconscious, the dream, the astral state, and energies, I guess you will, not the astral state, but the astral energies. So the emotion kind of operates on that realm. It kind of operates here and there, and that's why, and depending on the moon, if you have, let's say, a moon conjunct Neptune or a moon in a water house, this can be some very intuitive types because the moon is an emotional, it is the in between states here. We are now in a more evolved place where we can come to know ourselves through emotions. And emotions is the gateway, it is the medium to experience the soul, the astral, the afterlife, the intuition. So the moon is a very good place for us to look at these qualities in someone, how they access their intuition, how they use it. Of course, like we saw in the video as well, the relationship with the mother, with women. But again, this audio is to complement with the nature of the soul. So we are looking at the archetype here of the fourth house, the Cancer archetype, the moon, as the emotional body. The fourth house does indicate the nature of your early environment, your family dynamics, and how that imprinted you, and how you defined yourself from that, your early formation of self. So it is a very, very personal space, and I really think that there is not enough attention given to the importance of the sign of the IC. And the sign of the IC, like I said, really does correlate with the structure of your personality. This is the root of your being. So, understanding the sign over there really helps to understand who you are on a core level, a core level at the end of the day. Look at the sign there. That's really who you are. On a personality level, that's the core that holds everything else in place. And fourth houses that have a lot of challenging planets in there, a Saturn, a Pluto, even a Mars that can bring some aggression or some sort of, it can be hard. People that have Mars in the fourth house, and these can indicate some sort of trauma from family life. Chiron in there as well. And traumas in the fourth house can be really tricky because when they're unresolved, because it's an emotional house and an emotional place, when they're unresolved, this can bring a lot of displaced emotions. And this can bring unbalances to the personality as well. So, the fourth house is a very tender place, and things that happen here in the fourth house impact deeply. And understanding the quality of your fourth house, the sign, the planets in there, really helps you to understand what you're looking at here for the necessary elements for the core structure of your personality. Now, even if we're dealing, let's say, with a Capricorn, which tends to be rather limiting and cold to have as a family dynamic, as the sign in your IC, but even a Capricorn in there will bring. I've done readings for many people with Capricorn IC, and these people can for sure bring a lot of stability into their families. These people are so consistent, so loyal. yes, perhaps a little traditional, conservative, but at the same time, this is like you have the pillar of someone's personality as the rock solid structure of Capricorn. I mean, these people are here to last. Talk about Of course, that usually comes, most of the time, it does come with some sort of a restricting family upbringing, rather limiting in affection or emotions with the mother or the family. And it's interesting to see how each person will bring a different story here to the picture, but also a different evolutionary intention, a different soul purpose. And it's beautiful to watch everything come together when you look at the entire chart and the real reason why they would have, let's say, a Capricorn on the IC. I want you to know that regardless of the sign in there, yes, it will describe a lot of your upbringing, your family dynamics, and all of that. And even if it was something traumatizing and something challenging and difficult, this is meant to be experienced by you, these qualities, so that they can instigate the whole other polarity of experience of that same sign. And just as we saw with the example of Capricorn, how Capricorn can indicate some sort of a restrictive family, or maybe very authoritative, or a limiting in affection, for example, limited affection. On the other hand, this can produce some of the most reliable. Maybe the person, because they didn't have that in their home, they decided to become the most reliable and parent, or just that can help sustain the family and just be present, and that causes them to become a very solid figure in their family life. These qualities become important to them, maybe perhaps because of the lack of it when they were young. So it's very interesting, and this is why we can't say, oh, this is in the fall, or this person is this, or this sign is not happy, even if you're talking about an Aries, for example, in the fourth house. Aries needs to express itself. We can't say that it's bad or it's impaired, because what if the soul chose to come with that for a reason? And it did. So, for example, let's take me, for example. I've got Aquarius in my on my IC. And I'll tell you what, for anybody who has Aquarius on the IC, this is not easy, because life does not let you settle for the most part. There is so much inconsistency that comes with the sign of Aquarius. And when you put Aquarius on the IC, it's an energy that's not stable. And what are you going to do? Oh, you're doomed. You're never going to have stability. You're never going to find a stable home. You're always going to be living around like a nomad. It's all in how you look at it, it's all in the interpretation. And yes, this can be quite difficult for my moon and Saturn conjunction that loves stability, that needs stability. To have the inconsistency of that Aquarius IC is not easy, and it does describe the harsh upbringing that I had of moving around. I never settled anywhere for more than a year or so, because growing up as a child in the cult, we moved around very often, very frequently. And, that was very descriptive of my Aquarius IC. Always moving around, and until today, I carry that pattern of just always, moving. And from one perspective, it can seem like, wow, that's okay, that's odd. But when you look at the ruler, Uranus, of my IC, conjunct my ascendant, seeing that in my chart really helped me to understand that even the inconsistency from my upbringing, or what I could very easily perceive as, oh, poor me, I never had a stable childhood, and it was so disruptive, and it was so this and that and the other, and all I ever wanted, my poor moon and Saturn conjunction, is stability. Well, what if? What if this caused the necessary blueprint to become active in my personality of this unpredictability so that I could at some point in my life be moved enough to express the qualities of freedom through my ascendant. Because, like we saw already, Uranus brings freedom, and that is the ultimate purpose. It shows where it is that we are ready to experience freedom, where we as a soul want to experience freedom in the human journey. So, who are we to judge? Who are we to judge? Even the most difficult combinations, even an Aries in a fourth house, in an IC as well. That maybe leaves home at a very early age. Everything that Aries does is so full of fire and life and impulsive sometimes, or just it does things fast. When you find Aries, let's say in the seventh house, these are people that get married, fast, usually at an early age. But Aries in the fourth house, this is someone that maybe left home at an early age, is rebellious, all those characteristics of the difficult Aries type. But hey, what if they were meant to leave home at an early age because this is how they would develop the leadership qualities that are ingrained in their blueprint by sheer virtue of having those qualities on their IC, which represents the foundation of your personality. So that hopefully helps to shed some awareness on the emotional dynamics and the emotional realities brought about by this archetype. The moon, the fourth house, the IC, this is really for, this archetype is here so that we can discover ourself through emotional awareness. So yes, you may hear that Cancers are moody, or that fourth house suns are private and personal. These are the same qualities as Cancer, by the way. And the moon is needy, or it's all about the ego, but this is the part of the human journey. This is the part of the human personality that is designed to experience itself as ego, as having needs, as having emotional awarenesses, emotional desires, to experience life, to experience itself, and continue in the process, in the journey. Now, there is also very maternal instinct here, and of course, anything that comes through in the fourth house will ignite home dynamics, family situations. But at the end of the day, it's your personal space. This is your inner space. So anything igniting your fourth house is igniting your inner space. Now, it is going to be different than the inner space of the eighth house and the inner space of the 12th house, the other two water houses, as you're going to see. But the inner space here of the 12th, of the fourth house, is home, is what you consider to be your roots, your living space, your personal space, your family dynamics, the root of your personality. So, of course, you're going to be protective. The maternal instincts are going to come in. The protection instincts are going to come in. This is your personal space. This is where you guard with all the instincts that you have, whether you have children or not, whether you have a family of your own or not. This is your personal space. And the sign here is going to define a lot how you guard that personal space. Are you more open? Are you more protective? Are you more introspective? Do you let anybody come into your personal space? Are you the type that always has your house full of people? Or do you only invite people after you really trust them? Ooh, Scorpio in the fourth house. The sign is going to describe a lot of that. And always keeping in mind that this was the chosen experience by the soul to get to know the personality it's developing in this particular human journey. The fourth house, the moon, and Cancer, the first place of quote unquote evolution of the stage when you become emotionally aware.